The war has lasted for 2.5 years, and so has our channel. Now, if you're new to us and the task of going back to the beginning seems daunting, or if you've been with us for a while and just want a refresher, we've done a series of recap specials to help you out, and this is one of them. I'm Indy Nidell. Welcome to a Great War recap special covering the months of November and December 1916 and January 1917. As November began, two huge battles, the Somme and Verdun, were still raging on the Western Front. At Verdun, the French had just taken Fort Douaumont, and it looked like they finally had the upper hand there. They soon occupied the whole of Vaud, but while the battle continued all month, it was relatively quiet. Over at the Somme, it was anything but quiet after the first few days of the month. The British attacked repeatedly, especially after Commander Sir Douglas Haig decided a small victory would make him look good at the Allied leaders' mid-month meeting at Chantilly. And while they did see some successes, the battle finally came to an end on the 18th. It had seen over 1 million total casualties in under 5 months, and the Allies had not even taken their first day's objectives. There were many battles raging all month long on the two Romanian fronts. As November began, things looked okay for the Romanians, who were fighting all 4 Central Powers, but danger soon loomed. Russia tried to send help, but terrible logistics meant it would take weeks. Meanwhile, German General Erich von Falkenhayn broke through the Romanian mountains on the 17th, and Field Marshal August von Mackensen began crossing the Danube the week after. Romania, with its huge reserves of grain and oil, was in trouble, and the month ended with 3 columns of men converging on Bucharest, the capital. On the Italian front, the 9th Battle of the Isonzo River ended early in November, with the Italians unable to break through, and that front settled down for the winter. One front that did the opposite was the Macedonian front, which came to life the 11th. Over the next week, the 5-nation army encircled and then took Monastir, though they were not strong enough to push much further. In other news, the ocean liner turned Allied hospital ship BRITANNIC, sister ship to the Titanic, was sunk. It was the largest ship sunk during the war. Germany declared an independent Poland under German supervision. This was an attempt to convince Poles to join them in the fight, but since it didn't give Poles any real political power, it backfired, and there were 2 big celebrity deaths in November. The great German flying ace Oswald Boelcke flew his last, and Austro-Hungarian Emperor Franz Joseph passed away at the age of 86 after 68 years on the imperial throne. This was a huge crisis for his empire, for in many ways he had been the glue that had held it together. His grandnephew, the Archduke Karl, became the new emperor. November ended and December began with turmoil in neutral Greece. The country was split in 2 by this time between royalists and Venizelos, those loyal to Prime Minister Eleftherios Venizelos. The Allies had hundreds of thousands of troops stationed in Salonika, but when they landed just a few thousand at the Piraeus and marched to Athens, they were attacked by royalist forces. The following week, there were massacres of Venizelos there, and the Allies imposed a blockade on the country and occupied the Cyclades. The Allies next demanded control of the post, the telegraph, and the railways, and also demanded humiliating terms from the Greeks before they would lift the blockade. In Romania, the Central Powers captured yet another capital city as Bucharest fell. The Allies had yet to capture one. The defenders destroyed as much Romanian grain and oil as they could to prevent it from falling into enemy hands, but it was still a huge deal. And as the month continued, the Russo-Romanian forces retreated further and further. And though they made strong and spirited defense at Râmnicu Sărat, by the new year they had been forced to retreat across the Sereth River. It was there that the Central Powers' advance would finally run out of steam thanks to exhaustion and supply problems. The Macedonian front went quiet for the winter, but the Mesopotamian front came to life after months of calm. The British had been humiliated there in the spring after surrendering to the Ottoman forces at Kut al-Amara, but now they were heading up the Tigris, re-equipped and revitalized to try again. They made a good start before bad weather ground things to a halt until the new year. Also in the Middle East, the Palestinian front began coming to life again as the British took El Arish the 22nd. They were now in good position to stop any attacks on Suez while being able to provision themselves for their own offensives to the north. At Verdun, the French launched a huge counteroffensive, and it was a big success, pushing the Germans back several kilometers and taking many thousands of prisoners. The Germans were now over 7 kilometers from Verdun, and that battle, the longest of the war, came to an end after 299 days. General Robert Nivelle, who emerged as the hero of the battle, became the new commander-in-chief of the French armies, replacing Joseph Joffre. Now, Nivelle was optimistic about 1917, but among the French armies, morale was dangerously low and mutiny was a possibility. There were a great many political shakeups in December throughout Europe, notably in Britain and Austria-Hungary, where David Lloyd George and Heinrich Clam-Martinic became the new prime ministers, and in Russia, where the nation was in turmoil. Public opinion began to turn more and more against the Tsar, and his loyal followers like Rasputin and Alexander Protopopov tried dangerous political machinations. So dangerous were they seen that Rasputin was assassinated as the year came to an end. And in the wake of his assassination, the people blamed the Tsar evermore for what they had earlier perceived to be Rasputin's failings. The new year brought with it a whole host of resignations and new appointments within what was now the musical chairs of the Russian government. The new year also began with ideas of peace being floated from several quarters. Each of these imposed conditions on the enemy that were unacceptable, and there would be no peace. Something that would pretty much guarantee that there would be no peace was Kaiser Wilhelm giving the green light to reinstituting unrestricted submarine warfare beginning February 1st. This winter, the turnip winter, had been so harsh for Germany, seriously running out of food by now, that they planned to sink so much shipping that Britain would be forced out of the war. The downside was that neutral nations like Denmark or the United States might join the war, but they planned to win before that became a problem. This was the harshest winter of the war all over, and it prevented all major actions on all European fronts in January, though there was minor action every day, everywhere. However, fighting was picking up in the Middle East. The British secured the entire Sinai Peninsula. They continued advancing up the Tigris, and by the month's end had cleared the right bank below Kut. And down in German East Africa, the Allies were also advancing and took Likuju. Although January wasn't a huge month of combat, perhaps the quietest of the whole war to date, it was a month of planning. Woodrow Wilson was still planning peace. Robert Nivelle was planning Allied spring offensives. The Greeks were planning guerrilla war in the Balkans, and the German foreign minister telegraphed a plan to Mexico, whereby Mexico would attack the United States with German financial support. Wheels within wheels. And this is where we stand after 2.5 years of war and millions of dead soldiers from all over the world. There is no end in sight, and though the war is quiet for the moment, buried under the snows of winter, when the spring comes and warms the land, the guns will fire again by their thousands, and the men will die again by their millions. If you want to refresh your memory about the previous years of the war, check out our recap playlist because we do these kind of episodes every 3 months. Do not forget to subscribe. See you next time.